The Tears of God. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This book continues the story of the Arab sugar daddy and the beautiful Indian girl, and the story of the Indian child bride and the old Arab husband, and the story of the Indian Miss World and the rage of Muslims of the world, and also the story of Christina and the complete Jew. They have been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. This tale resonates with genuine love, strong resilience, and steadfast courage. I invite you to accompany me as I narrate the adventures of the extremely beautiful Indian girl, Aphrodite Khan, and her handsome American lover, Michael Lewinsky, in the Muslim world. Before we dive in the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader this novel is narrated in 6 books. Book 1, The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. Book 2, The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband. Book 3, The Indian Miss World and the Rage of Muslims of the World. Book 4, Christina and the Complete Jew. Book 5, The Tears of God, Jews, Blacks, and Muslim Women. And Book 6, The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is an intriguing epic story which exhibits resilience, love, and sacrifice. Book 5. Researching the social life of the Muslim woman in the Islamic world. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from a review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 51. Heroes or Betrayers. They miraculously escaped from the bottomless pit. Michael and Christina had given up hope and remained motionless in the dark alley for a long time. They expected to be found any moment and summarily shot and killed like stray dogs. They have lost their fear of death and welcomed it as a respite from their dire conditions. If it was not against their Christian faith, they may have killed each other and departed from the hellish country of South Sudan. It is the Indian wife who asked her American husband to kill her first and then kill himself. Christina has concluded that everywhere they go, they are going to experience only death and destruction, and sooner or later they are going to be killed too. She understood why those 900 Jews at the Masada fortress had killed their children, wives, daughters, and mothers, and then killed each other to the last standing man who took his life too. They preferred to die by their own swords rather than surrender, and were taken slaves and tortured to death by the ruthless Roman soldiers. The ex-Jew, the strong Christian American husband, has rebuked his ex-Muslim Indian wife and reminded her that they are worshipping the living God. He is a sovereign God and must decide when and how they should die. One of his 10 commandments simply said, "Thou shalt not kill." He also told her that only the bad guys in the Bible had killed themselves, such as King Saul, Ahithophel, Zimri, and the traitor Judas Iscariot. Their continuous suffering is nothing compared to the suffering that Job endured. Then the American husband told his Indian wife that what she had suggested was what Job's wife had suggested to her suffering husband. Job's wife, who after her husband had suffered numerous catastrophes at the hand of Satan, encouraged him to curse God and die. Even so, Job refused to consider the evil suggestion. Suicide in the Bible is usually the result of evil men realizing what is in store for them because of their evils. In other instances, the believers in God are encouraged not to kill themselves or choose not to do so on their own, as being the better choice. Suicide is simply not condoned in the Bible. The fugitive American couple spent their first night in the streets of Juba sleeping like homeless people in a dark corner of the same alley. They slept by shifts for fear of being attacked and eaten alive by those stray dogs which kept up their harassment throughout the night. It is yet another long and horrifying night that they spent in Africa. When morning finally comes, they do not know whether to venture out of their alley or continue sitting there until starvation can end their troubles. They are thirsty, hungry, fearful, and unfortunate. They felt as if the killers in the night were sweeping the streets for the ones who got away from their death camps. The necessity for survival, however, has forced them to drag their tired bodies and move out of the alley. Juba City is like a ghost town. The streets are deserted. People are hiding in their houses. Only military vehicles and police cars are patrolling the streets, looking for any non-Dinkas to pick up and restock the holding facilities of their death concentration camp. The test of being a Dinka or not is simply the response to a question. If the suspect fails to answer in the proper Dinka tongue, he or she has sentenced himself or herself to death. Sometimes, Dinka soldiers and policemen broke into people's houses to check on the occupants. Anyone so positively identified as non-Dinka is unceremoniously dragged from their homes to the killing fields or simply shot on the spot and killed. In response, thousands of people ran to the UN refugee camps, seeking shelter and protection. The Dinka soldiers invariably followed them there and killed many of them along with the odd UN workers. The American couple continued to walk the main streets, directionless. 2 military vehicles and a police car passed them by without stopping. A few civilian cars went along their way without incident. Every time a car passed them by, their hearts began to beat like drums. After walking for a couple of hours, they found themselves in an area with tall buildings. Some of those buildings bore the names of foreign embassies. The couple approached one building and talked to the security guards. They revealed their original nationalities and then requested to be directed to the American embassy. They are told that due to the situation in Juba, all the foreign embassies are closed. The 2 homeless American lovers still asked to be shown the directions to their embassy. In that land of death and destruction, there is no place left for them to go except the building that flies the stars and stripes on its flagpole. They decided to gain entrance even if they must sleep on the doorstep, starve, or get shot and killed in the process. Fortunately, the only foreign embassy that is still operational is the American embassy. The couple felt like they had reached the home ground. There are hundreds of people like them who are stranded in the south of Sudan and want to exit hell as soon as possible. Most of them are originally South Sudanese who went to America as resettled refugees and had acquired American citizenship but came back to work in their country of origin. Now they all want nothing more than to flee the genocide and return to the States. There is heavy security in the building. The security guards are American Marines flown in from the nearby American military bases. The couple stood for hours under the blazing sun until their turn came. When they entered, they demanded the issuance of their American passports, which were taken from them by the Northern Sudanese Police Authority at the En Nahid town. Michael and Christina expected that it is their right to get their passports reissued to them at any overseas American embassy or consulate. However, when they filled out some applications and stated truthfully why their American passports were taken from them, and who had confiscated them, their case was referred to the ambassador. All other applicants have proof of their American citizenship except the fugitive couple. All bona fide American citizens will be airlifted and sent to Kenya. When they arrive at the American embassy in Nairobi, they will be provided with food and temporary lodging until their repatriation to the United States of America. Michael and Christina have been exempted from those privileges because they lack documentary evidence of their American citizenship. Unfortunately, the ambassador refused to believe their story. The couple said they were ready to swear under oath by placing their right hands on the Holy Bible. The ambassador deadpanned them and snapped, "Even if I should believe your story, American immigration regulations do not permit me to issue any traveling documents, because you two had acted deceitfully by assuming alternative Muslim identities despite you both having Christian identities. None of you had the right to go to a recognized Muslim religious leader in the States and fool him. You two had not only lied in the States, but you deceived the police authorities of many Arab countries by assuming false identities. The couple could not believe their ears when they heard an American top diplomat speaking to them in that unfriendly way and accusing them of being shameless liars. According to the American ambassador, the couple's passports are invalid documents because they had been obtained through deception and lying. The excuse that they gave for lying and claiming to be Muslims has been deemed unacceptable by him. He sarcastically added, "No one appointed you guys as the saviors of Muslim women." The couple told him that they were ready to be prosecuted by American law upon arrival in their homeland. They said they are even ready to be sent directly to an American jail in the States, and in due time stand trial for their transgressions. The only thing they want in that demanding situation is to be sent home. The American ambassador refused to grant them even that minimum right. When they reached the doorsteps of the American embassy, the couple expected to be received as heroes and not betrayers. However, at the end of the day, their ambassador treated them as traitors rather than heroes. However, Michael and Christina know that they have no option but to keep badgering their American ambassador until finally, he gives in and relents. He reiterated that there would be no travel documents issued before their case is first verified by the American FBI. The embassy must contact the FBI division in their city of origin to check the veracity of their claims. Short of that, they are to be denied any financial assistance, traveling documents, and air tickets, and the only American soil their feet could ever touch would be the ground at the embassy in Juba. In the following weeks or months, it may take to investigate their identities. It is left to them to take care of themselves or to find someone to provide their food and accommodation in South Sudan. The two American lovers felt more desperate and helpless than when they got imprisoned in En Nahid town, the helicopter raid, and were surrounded by flames of fire, the naked savages of the jungle who wanted to eat them alive and drink their blood, the military truck of the Nua soldiers, and the massacre in the detention of the ruthless Dinka soldiers. Chapter 52. The Good Samaritan Ethiopian Jew. When all doors of hope are slammed on their faces, the fugitive and homeless American couple Christina and Michael meet a Good Samaritan in that lawless land. The Good Samaritan happened to be an employee of the American embassy and witnessed the mistreatment of the American couple. He is an Ethiopian Jew. The moment they were physically ejected from their American embassy, this Ethiopian Jew approached them, offered his hand, and promised to help. He gave his right hand to Michael, and while shaking hands with him he told him that he was ready to give them some help. He also shook hands with Christina, and then told the couple to wait for him in the street until he completes his work, whereupon he can come and take them to a place that offers protection and help. The helpless American couple felt as if God had sent down an angel to rescue them at difficult and desperate moments. If that Good Samaritan had not appeared at that particular instant, it is conceivable that the couple might have either gone and drowned themselves in the Bahr al-Jabal River, the White Nile, or returned to their ruthless Dinka chasers in a volunteer surrender and suicide death. For many hours, the American couple Michael and Christina had been without water and food. The last food they ate and water drank was in the Nua military truck. Christina is one of the richest women in India, and here in the youngest African country she and her American husband Michael are starving to death. They are longing for someone to give them a few drops of water and a loaf of bread. They waited, counting the minutes as hours for their savior to show up. Their Good Samaritan reappeared at lunchtime and brought them some food and soft drinks, carrying them out of the cafeteria of the embassy. There is not a single restaurant or shop open in the entire capital city. The whole city of Juba is placed under siege around-the-clock curfew. The only place open is the Embassy of the United States of America. The embassy is open under pressure that had been exercised by the U.S. government on the government of the South of Sudan. The permission to open the embassy under such an emergency was issued directly by the Dinka President Salva Kiir. The embassy is keen to vacate all trapped American citizens to Kenya and Uganda, and onward to the States. On the government of the South of Sudan. The permission to open the embassy under such an emergency was issued directly by the Dinka President Salva Kiir. The embassy is keen to vacate all trapped American citizens to Kenya and Uganda and onward to the States. The American couple consumed the heavenly manna and quails and thanked their benevolent men 100 times for the blessed mercies shown to them. Then they introduced themselves to their guardian angel and revealed their names and the dangerous situation they were in Africa. Their Good Samaritan is such an open and frank person. He told them his name and the name of his wife. He went by the name of Shlomo Mola, and he said his wife's name was Nina Tamanoshala. Both are Jews. They are childless and presently living in a hotel room provided by the American Embassy. Since the civil war broke out in Juba, they were forced to flee for their lives and sought the protection of the American Embassy. All the foreign employees and workers of the embassy are accommodated in the same hotel and securely guarded around the clock by American security guards. While the hungry two lovers are still eating their food, the Jewish man tells them everything about himself. He is an elderly man. He is a talkative man, but everything he says is pleasing to hear. He also cracked jokes and spoke in wise, soft words. He is the kind of a man who learned through extensive experience and can impart his lessons to his listeners in an abbreviated time. The foreign couple has been taken aback by his wisdom as well as his simplicity. After that, their Jewish Good Samaritan returned to his work and promised to come back once the day was done. When the Ethiopian Jew Shlomo Mola completed his daily work, he returned and shared his plan to help the two fugitive lovers out. He told them that he had his own apartment, but since the tribal unrest started, he closed it up and made his way to the hotel with his wife for their safety. He does not want them to take the same kind of risk and go and live in his apartment without any security. He then said the safest place for the couple was the UN refugee camp in Juba. Thousands of stranded locals and foreigners are living in the temporary refugee camp. Moreover, in the camp, they will be provided with free lodging and food. He also said that he knew a few foreign workers in one refugee camp personally, promising to take them there himself and introduce his two foreign acquaintances to them. His friends are Ethiopians working for the UN refugee camp in Juba. After telling them what he intended to do for them, Shlomo Mola asked the American couple why the American ambassador was unwilling to help them. In a few words he said, the ambassador is called Haj Malik Baraka. He is an African American and a member of the Nation of Islam which Louis Farrakhan heads. The American couple with further explanation understood why the Muslim ambassador was annoyed when they told him they came to witness and document the abuses of Muslim women. And their ultimate goal is later to expose those abuses to the outside world. It is just like a couple of non-Muslim Americans unknowingly went to Osama bin Laden, the founder of Al-Qaeda, or Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, and told him the same story, and then asked him to help them escape and return to their homeland. Shlomo Mola strictly warned the couple against trying to confront the ambassador about his religious bias while they are still in the lawless state of South Sudan. He strongly believes that the Muslim ambassador may seek the help of the Somali Muslim terrorists and silence them before they exit out of the jungle-like country where they saw those two warring bitter enemies, the Nuers and Dinkas, fighting like terrorists and devils. According to him, the first step for the American couple is to obtain refugee status in South Sudan. With that, as foreigners, they can apply for resettlement in any other country. The best and fastest choice will be Kenya. When the couple reaches Nairobi, then they can reapply for resettlement in the United States of America. Such a process may take some time, but it is the best option available to them. Michael and Christina are not troubled by the fact that they are going to be refugees in a foreign country, but their hearts bleed blood, and their eyes shed rivers of tears when they realize that they must return to their beloved own country America as resettled refugees. At any rate, they know their present helpless and homeless situation is worse than becoming refugees all the rest of their lives. Shlomo Mola brought again food and drinks for his new miserable acquaintances. He joked that they should eat as much as they could, since one never knows when one will find food next in the war-torn land and country of starvation in South Sudan. Although he said it as a joke, the wretched American couple perceived that that was the wisest and truest words he had ever spoken since they met him. Understandably, they finished their meals in the gratitude shown by those who are accustomed to none. In the meantime, the stranded Southern Sudanese, who have American citizenship, have turned the street in front of the American embassy into a haven of safe refuge. They are eating, sleeping, urinating, defecating, and doing all other human basic activities in that American stronghold street. They know that if the Dinka soldiers and policemen come after them there, the American Marines will turn them into corpses. The Good Samaritan chose to risk his job to help the American couple. He told his driver to first take him with his two good American friends to the refugee camp, and then he could drop him off at the hotel. The car is marked as untouchable because it is bearing the American flag, and has the name of the American embassy written all over it. If someone fires a bullet at it, it means war and woe to that person. It would have been better if he had not come out of his mother's womb. While they are traveling inside that bulletproof American vehicle, the couple never felt so safe and honored as that time, from the day they ventured out of the safe womb of their motherland and came to the dangerous third world. Their Good Samaritan's sense of humor added to the moment's beauty. Amid their adversity, he made them laugh after the laughter had departed from their hearts for so long. As if they had visited hell for a year and miraculously came out of it. He made them feel happy and secure after happiness and security became beyond their reach. He is truly an angel in human form. After registering them in the Juba refugee camp and securing a humble tent for them, the Beta Israeli man kissed the American couple goodbye and left. He already told the couple that the camp is not that good place, but it is the only available choice for them. It is overcrowded beyond its intended capacity. It was built to house 3,000 refugees, but so far 30,000 people made it their safe home. Due to the enormous number of displaced refugees, there are many humanitarian crises. Diseases, lack of sanitation, less food, unwholesome water, and many refugees have no tents to sleep in, and therefore they are sleeping out in the open with their little ones. Daily reports included rapes, thefts, fights, and deaths. A few times people were attacked and killed at night by the Dinkas. 2 Indian UN workers were killed in one such Dinka raid. Due to those Dinka raids and natural catastrophes, the refugee camp became for many like the killing fields of Cambodia. Snakes and scorpions bite many refugees every day and kill them through poisoning. Even wild beasts attacked at night and killed many. There are many foreign refugees in that camp. The majority of them are Somalis. There are also other African refugees. 70% of the refugees are non-Dinka Southern Sudanese. Those Sudanese tribes have become refugees in their own country. The only 2 Western refugees are Michael and Christina. They look like 2 white moles among that sea of black African refugees. Their presence in the camp surprised everybody, including the UN employees and workers. That fact worked for their good, and led the staff to treat them as VIP refugees or special inmates. They eat the same food the staff is eating, and live in the quarters normally reserved for staff. Of course, there is a far more pressing reason, one known only to the Good Samaritan Ethiopian Jew Shlomo and his friends. He is the one who broke yet another rule, and requested his friends to treat those 2 good Americans a bit differently due to the different environment they were born and brought up in. His recommendation worked yet another miracle. The American couple's names have been pushed to the top of the waiting list, though they just came in. After living for 1 month, Michael and Christina Lewinsky have been informed by the Juba Refugee Camp Administration that their names appeared in the list of those foreign refugees who are going to be transferred soon by a UN plane to another refugee camp in Nairobi. Before they are airlifted and sent to Kenya, the American couple met their Good Samaritan once again, and thanked him endlessly for the kindness that he showed to them. They took his address and promised to keep in touch. Though it was only 1 month's friendship, the couple felt as if they had known the Goodman from the time of their births. He checked on them daily, and many a time, he brought outside food and drinks for them. He brought his wife Nina and introduced her personally to them. He also brought them some second-hand clothes and other needed items such as blankets and bed sheets. He supplied them with some insecticides to keep the mosquitoes and bugs at bay, and made their stay in the refugee camp as tolerable as possible. He told them that, if he could, he would have taken them to live with him and his wife in the hotel. Chapter 53. The mass migration of Muslim refugees to the West. Up until the day the 2 American refugees, Michael and Christina, boarded a small UN plane with other refugees and flew from South Sudan and toward Kenya, they had not gotten any definitive answers to their applications at the American embassy. They have exited one African country as refugees in favor of another African land. They have been simply transferred from one refugee camp to another refugee asylum. As it is with all refugee camps, this is to be their permanent residence until they are granted resettlement in another host country. Their movements are restricted and confined within the camp. If they dare to venture out and are apprehended by the Kenyan police, they will be treated as illegal aliens. In that case, they will be jailed for some time and then returned to their camp. During that time, they will be exposed to all kinds of physical torture and sexual abuse by the corrupt African police. Some Somali refugee girls suffered brutal rapes while their male counterparts died at the hands of the Kenyan policemen. Many refugees ended up living in the camps for years, living out the remainder of their years in them. Some were born and raised in the camps, knowing no other life, like criminals serving their life imprisonment in maximum security prisons. Their situations are like the Palestinian refugees who lived for over a half-century as refugees in refugee camps in Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. In 1967, the Allied armies of 5 Arab countries told the Muslim Palestinians to flee from Israel to avoid being killed by friendly fire, a result of their combined attacks against the so-called Zionist state to annihilate all the Jews. Over 500,000 Palestinians trusted their Arab friends and fled to Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. In the Six-Day War, the IDF, the Jewish-Israeli Defense Force, defeated the combined Arab armies of over 1 million soldiers. Those Palestinians, who placed their trust in the hands of the Jews, remain in their homes in Israel until today, while those who trusted in the promises of the Arabs became perpetual refugees in Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. Their children were born in the refugee camps, and they, in turn, grew to have their children in the very same camps. The Arabs never granted them citizenship simply because they are far more valuable as stateless citizens in their propaganda war. They now number in the millions. The majority of them are Jordanians who became Palestinians overnight. They want Israel to allow them to return to Palestine when most of them are not Palestinians. In 1967, 500,000 Palestinians fled out of their homes and became refugees in the above-mentioned Arab countries. But today 9.6 million Arabs claim to be Palestinians and demand the right of return. Even chickens and dogs don't multiply that fast. If any of them manages to escape from those perpetual refugee camps to make his way to a Western country, in 3 years or so he will be granted the citizenship of that country. But if he managed somehow to smuggle himself into a rich Arab country, which is second to impossible, he would be treated as a parasite and an intruder and get harassed constantly by the police of that country. No matter how long he lives in that Arab country, he will never become a citizen. The only option left to him is to stay, live, breed, and die as a refugee. This is an obvious violation of human rights, one against which the UN has never passed a resolution. Today, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria steadfastly refuse to grant citizenship status to those Palestinian refugees and their children who have been living as refugees since 1967. Some of them are third-generation refugees, since the first two Arab-Israeli wars of 1948 and 1949. There are millions of Syrian, Iraqi, Yemeni, Libyan, and Somali refugees waiting to be resettled in Western countries. For instance, there are over 1 million Somali refugees in Kenya awaiting resettlement in Western countries. After the recent Somali terrorist attack at a university in Kenya, which resulted in the murder of 147 innocent Kenyan students, the Kenyan government is determined to send them all back to Somalia. It gave the UN a deadline to vacate its refugee camps, or otherwise the Kenyan authorities would literally kick them off Kenyan soil. If this conflict is not resolved speedily, we are bound to see all Western airports crowded with Somali refugees coming to their new homes for resettlements. The Big Mama, the USA, would be pressurized on humanitarian grounds to accept the majority of them. In this regard, an American citizen, Maggie states, over 7 years ago, a church group, from another state, brought a large number of refugees to the rural area where Ann Corcoran lives. She then explains the federal agency's involvement in populating the USA with Muslims charged by their holy book to spread Islam throughout the world. Some of our churches are making this repopulation their mission, with the help of the United Nations. And Corcoran writes, I discovered that the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees was choosing most of our refugees. It's under the influence of the powerful Muslim group, the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation. Not surprisingly, a large number of US-bound refugees are coming from countries with large numbers of people who hate us, including Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, just to name a few. The U.S. State Department then distributes the refugees to 9 major federal contractors, 6 of which are so-called charities, but all are largely funded by the U.S. Treasury. They are not passing the dish on Sundays for the $1 billion price tag for the resettlement, and that figure doesn't include the extensive welfare benefits refugees receive. The refugees are then sent to over 190 cities in the U.S., where the 9 major contractors support 350 subcontractors. The refugees receive help from the subcontractor for up to 6 months, and the subcontractor then submits paperwork to admit the relatives of the first group. As the years have passed, I have become increasingly alarmed by the percentage of problematic Muslim refugees admitted and distributed around the U.S. through this program. By the way, the refugee resettlement program is not the only one used for legally admitting Muslims, but it is one of the most important. Many are forming cities within cities. Perhaps you know one where you live, where mosques are being built to consolidate, train, and promote a growing American Muslim population and its Islamic supremacist doctrine, called Sharia. This process of Muslim colonization is called the Hijra, the holy migration. Muhammad told his followers to migrate and spread Islam to dominate all the lands of the world. He said, you are obliged to do so, and that is exactly what they are doing now with the help and support of the UN, the U.S. State Department, and the Christian and Jewish groups assigned to seed them throughout the country. Your tax dollars pay for it all. We only need to look to a troubled Europe to see the path ahead for America, if we can't stop this migration, and stop it soon. There is no reason on earth that we should have brought over 100,000 Somalis and another 100,000 Iraqi Muslims to America. Soon we will be resettling Syrian Muslims in large numbers. The UN, at the moment, has over 10,000 in a pipeline destined for our towns. The FBI told Congress recently that they cannot be properly screened. If you don't help counter the Hijra, we are, in my opinion, doomed to destruction. Over time, this migration will be more devastating to your children and grandchildren, and to our country than any terrorist attack that could ever be. Why do Muslim refugees always need to be sent to Western countries and not rich Muslim countries? Why the burden of conscience must be laid on the backs of the infidels and not the Muslims. Who made the Muslim Somalis, Iraqis, Syrians, Yemenis, Libyans, Egyptians, Afghanis, Pakistanis, Nigerians, and Sudanese carry arms and plague their countries with bloody religious wars that resulted in the death of thousands and displacement of millions? Of course, the main cause is the hostile teachings of their Quran and the Sunnah of their Prophet. In any case, the waiting list for resettlement in Western countries can take a quite long time. The Somali refugee camps in Kenya were established 30 years ago. Understandably, many young refugees prefer to run off and face untold dangers rather than live and die in the camps. Some drown in the Mediterranean Sea on their way to Europe in small floating boats. Some forge documents and fly to Europe, only to be arrested at the airports. As is normally the case, these detainees are usually treated as refugees and considered the responsibility of the UN. The UN then would twist the arms of the host country and encourage the granting of permanent resident status, which eventually ended up in them being citizens of that country. Citizens on papers, but in hearts, their loyalty to their religion and country of origin will never die or waver. All Muslims of the world without a single exception believe that they are citizens of the Islamic Caliphate, which its leader is the Prophet Muhammad, and its capital city is Mecca in Saudi Arabia. Most European countries try to avoid the cost of taking care of those countless numbers of Muslim refugees, and the cost of their air return. Moreover, the unceasing Muslim terrorist attacks on their innocent citizens are the driving force that leads those European countries to get rid of the refugees and send them across the Atlantic Ocean to America, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. In addition, the majority of those illegal immigrants claim imminent mortal danger if they are sent home. Of course, the other alternative would be to send those poor refugees and their many children to the Big Mama, the United States of America. When the same refugees are resettled, well-fed, and educated, they will breed and rapidly multiply. Their children might become homegrown terrorists. Then the American Big Mama, who adopted those resettled Muslim refugees and reared them in love and care along with her infidel children, would become the great Satan, who needs to be destroyed. The crucial problem simply is this: the refugees with Islamic backgrounds can find integration into Western society impossible and insurmountable, where they seem to oppose everything Islamic. Muslims hold as sacred and as a right the concepts of halal food, the hijab, niqab, or burqa covering, the Islamic education provided by the madrasas, religious schools and mosques, the sanctity of halal marriage, the status of woman according to the Sharia, child marriage, wife beating, female genital mutilation, polygamy, the compulsory 5 prayers, the times of prayers, the use of washrooms, the societal views of infidels as unclean, inferiors, and enemies, the compulsory obligation of jihad for spreading Islam among non-Muslims, the concept of right and wrong, halal and haram, etc., etc., etc. Those religious obligations and restrictions and many more make it impossible for Muslims to be loyal to their religion, and at the same time to integrate into Western society. To prove the above point, let us refer to the case of an Australian jihadist who carried out a suicide mission for ISIS. He was an Australian Christian who converted to Islam through the internet. On March 23, 2015, an article in AFP mentioned that an Australian schoolboy, an 18-year-old teenager from Melbourne named Jake Bellardi, died while completing his suicide bombing mission for the Islamic State or Caliphate, which euphemistically called ISIS. The writer says Jake developed a complete hatred and opposition to the entire Australian system, and the ones the majority of the world are based upon. A blog widely attributed to Jake Bellardi explains the teen's switch from a suburban schoolboy in comfortable Melbourne to a violent jihadist ready to sacrifice his life for the cause of Allah. In an interview, his father, John Bellardi, says, "He was recruited online, and I knew nothing of this. I knew nothing of his radicalization. The changes that Islam can bring all of a sudden in the lives of its true and sincere followers can hardly be grasped or properly comprehended by the mind of a person who is not part of it. Sincerely following the teachings of Islam can change the person and turn him into a hater of anything and anyone who is non-Islamic. This is well expressed by the father of the very same Australian jihadist who blew himself up in the cause of Islam. I just couldn't believe it was my son. It's hard to process this. But that wasn't him. He was just a shy, lonely young man. How he got to this I cannot even start to try and explain. The words of this father explain so well the complete change that Islamic teachings can effect in the life of the one who follows them. In short, it created in the life of his son complete hatred and opposition to the entire Australian system, which is part of the entire Western society, and that which the majority of the world is based upon. Chapter 54. The compulsory religious obligations for Muslims everywhere they live. It is very imperative before we resume our narrative of the story of the two American refugees, Michael and Christina, to explain what the writer of the article meant when he said, "My son Jake developed a complete hatred and opposition to the entire Australian system, that is part of the entire Western society, and that which the majority of the world is based upon." First of all, Islam requires the true Muslim to completely commit to it and its cause. Islam calls this doctrine the al-wala wal-bara. This is an especially important doctrine in Islam, and needs to be fully explained before we proceed. Simply put, it means to love for the sake of Allah, and to hate for the sake of Allah. Al-wala wal-bara is love and hate for Allah's sake. But what do this love and hate exactly to mean? Loving for the sake of Allah means to love Allah, and to show loyalty to Him by following His Sharia. It means to love all that is good and permissible in the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad, sayings and deeds of the Prophet of Islam, his hadiths and biography. This type of love requires one to defend Allah's deen, the Islamic religion's way of life, preserve it and spread it. It is to love those who are obedient to Allah, and to defend and assist them. These are the party of Allah, Muslims. Enmity for the sake of Allah signifies showing anger and hatred toward those who oppose Allah, His Messenger Muhammad, His deen, Islamic religion, and the Muslim believers. Those who oppose Allah are the party of Satan, all non-Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Confucians, Sikhs, Yazidis, Zoroastrians, atheists, and Muslim apostates. Also, Muslim hypocrites or disloyal Muslims come under this category. It is also to struggle and fight against them to uphold and spread the way of Allah and His Messenger. Al-wala wal-bara requires one to ally oneself with Allah, His final Prophet Muhammad, and Muslims wherever they are found against the Kofar, infidels, even if it is against their relatives. The Islamic doctrine of the al-wala wal-bara is based on the following verses of the Quran and authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. O you who believe! Take not as awliya, supporters and helpers, your fathers and your brothers if they prefer disbelief to belief. And whoever of you does so, then he is one of the zalimun, wrongdoers. Surah Al-Tawbah 9, verse 33. Let not the believers take disbelievers for their friends in preference to believers. Whoever does this has no connection with Allah unless you are guarding yourselves against them as a precaution. Allah bids you beware of Himself. And to Allah is the journeying. Surah Al-Imran 3, verse 28. According to the Quranic commentator, Al-Qurtubi, this Quranic verse was revealed concerning a group of Muslims who had Jewish friends. Those Muslim believers were giving muwalat, support and help to those Jews. Some of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad said to them, "Keep away from those Jews, and beware of their friendship, for they could seduce you away from your religion, and guide you astray after you have believed." However, this group of Muslim believers disobeyed the advice and remained loyal to their Jewish friends, and so the exalted Allah revealed, "Let not the believers take disbelievers as awliya, supporters and friends." Through this verse, Allah forbids His believers, all Muslims, from exhibiting any form of muwalat with the disbelievers, all non-Muslim, infidels. This includes the manifestation of love and compassion to strengthen the ties with them or to regard them as companions and friends because of their kinship or acquaintance. The Muslim cannot be an ally of Allah's enemies, and it is impossible for a person to combine the love of Allah and the love of his enemies because this is a combination of opposites. Therefore, he who loves Allah must also hate his enemies. All non-Muslims are considered infidels and enemies of Allah, His Prophet, and Muslims. It is forbidden upon the Muslim believer to give muwalat to infidels and forsake the Muslim believers. There is no association or relationship whatsoever between Iman, Islamic faith, and Kufr, unbelief in Islam. The preceding verse strictly forewarns Muslims from muwalat al-kafirin, friendship with infidels, and alerts them to the consequences of such an action, with one exception being an extreme necessity, when one must avoid or protect oneself from the harm of injury inflicted upon infidels by presenting an outer appearance that belies what one conceals inside. This teaching is known as the Islamic taqiyya, and it is permitted under such circumstances. O you who believe! Do not take the Jews and the Christians for friends. They are friends of one another. And whoever of you takes them for friends is one of them. Surely Allah does not guide wrongdoing people. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 51. This verse very clearly forbids Muslims from being friends with Jews and Christians. Therefore, the infidels and enemies of Allah include all non-Muslims without exception. One is either a Muslim or an enemy of Allah and His Prophet, and hence Muslims must hate and try to convert him to their religion or kill him if he refuses to become Muslim. O you who believe! Do not take as your baitana, advisors, protectors, helpers, or friends, those outside your religion, pagans, Jews, Christians, and hypocrites, since they will not fail to do their best to corrupt you. They desire to harm you severely. Hatred has already appeared from their mouths, but what their breasts conceal is far worse. We have made plain to you the ayat, verses, proofs, evidence, if you understand. Surah Al-Imran 3, verse 118. Those who believe do battle for the cause of Allah, and those who disbelieve do battle for the cause of idols. So fight the friends of Satan. Surely, Satan's strategy is always weak. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 76. The Prophet Muhammad said, "The strongest bond of faith is loyalty for the sake of Allah, and opposition for His sake, love for the sake of Allah, and enmity for His sake." Musnad Ahmed, Book 4, page 357. Referring to the meaning of the Quran, by Sayyid Abul Ala al-Maududi, considered to be the greatest Muslim thinker in the 20th century, and the father of all the contemporary jihadist movements in the world, and in his renowned book, In the Shades of the Quran, Sayyid Qutb states, any Muslim who claims to have Iman, faith in Islam, must fulfill its conditions and requirements to deserve that title. Undoubtedly, fulfilling the rights of the al-Wala to love, support, help, follow, and defend Islam and Muslims, and fulfilling the rights of the al-Bara to hate, despise, desert, denounce, maintain the innocence of and immunity from unbelief and the infidels is the true manifestation of the Muslims' adherence to this deen, Islamic religion. The rights of the al-Wala toward Islam and Muslims can be concisely presented by the following. The migration from a non-Muslim land to a Muslim land to safeguard the religion, Islam, except those Muslims who are weak, oppressed, and those who cannot migrate due to geographical and contemporary political reasons. Also in the strict exemption are those who migrate to a disbeliever's land to spread Islam, seek medical treatment, business, or necessary knowledge provided that Muslim is knowledgeable in Islam, and can preserve his religion, openly practice Islamic rituals without compromise and maintain the rights of the al-Wala wal-Bara. Maulana Sayyid Abul Ala al-Maududi states that Islam wishes to destroy all states and governments anywhere on the face of the earth which are opposed to the ideology and program of Islam, regardless of the country or the nation which rules it. The purpose of Islam is to set up a state based on its ideology and program, regardless of which nation assumes the role of the standard-bearer of Islam, or the rule of which nation is undermined in the process of the establishment of an ideological Islamic state. Islam requires the earth, not just a portion, but the whole planet, because the entire mankind should benefit from the ideology and welfare program of Islam. Towards this end, Islam wishes to press into service all forces which can bring about a revolution, and a composite term for the use of all these forces is jihad. The objective of the Islamic jihad is to eliminate the rule of an un-Islamic system and establish in its stead an Islamic system of state rule, quoting Abu Ala al-Mudadi, Jihad in Islam, pages 6, 7, and 22. Islam also uses another enormously powerful incentive to draw the youth and convince them to die for its cause. This incentive can attract many youths because all young boys and girls love it the most. It is more powerful than alcohol and drugs. It is the incentive of free sex, and a lot of it. A Muslim jihadist knows that as soon as he reaches Syria, he will be wedded to 1 to 4 underage virgins, girls as young as 9 to 12. In addition to his 4 underage wives, he can sleep with many women of those defeated Syrian and Iraqi soldiers, Christians, and Yazidis, as right-hand possessed of the war female slaves, and those he could buy as female slaves at the slaves markets in Iraq and Syria. The jihadist also is encouraged to die as shaheed, or martyr, and go to paradise to enjoy the 72 virgins who are 1,000,000 times more beautiful than the women of this earth. This tempting promise makes one love death and hates life. He will be made to memorize by heart the following hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad and verses of the Quran that promise and describe the virgins of paradise. The Messenger of Allah, upon him blessings and peace, said, for the shaheed, Muslim martyr, in the divine presence there will be 6 qualities. 1. He will be forgiven from the first moment his blood is spilled. 2. He shall see his seat in paradise and be protected against the punishment of the grave. 3. He shall be safe from the greatest terror of the rising of the dead. 4. He shall be crowned with a diadem of dignity, 1 ruby of which is worth more than the entire world and its contents. 5. He shall be coupled with 72 spouses from the wide-eyed maidens of paradise. 6. He shall be granted to intercede for 70 of his relatives. This is an authentic hadith, reported by Ahmed and Al-Tirmizi. The Quran states, in them will be bashful virgins neither man nor jinn will have touched before. Then which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? Surah Al-Rahman 55, verses 56 to 57. We created the Houris and made them virgins, loving companions for those on the right hand. Surah Al-Waqiah 56, verses 34 to 37. In each, there shall be virgins chaste and white with dark-eyed virgins sheltered in their tents whom neither man nor jinn has touched before. That means those virgins of paradise did not have sex with human beings or male demons, but they are kept pure and virgins for the Muslim martyrs. Surah Al-Rahman 55, verses 70 to 77. If a Huri, a virgin, looks down from her abode in heaven onto the earth, the whole distance, space, shall be filled with light and fragrance. The Huri's face is more radiant than a mirror, and one can see one's image in her cheek. The marrow of her shins is visible to the eyes. Mishkat al-Masabi, Volume 3, pages 83 to 97. A Huri is a most beautiful young woman with a transparent body. The marrow of her bones is visible like the interior lines of pearls and rubies. She looks like red wine in a white glass. She is white and free from the routine physical disabilities of an ordinary woman such as menstruation, menopause, urinal and offal discharge, childbearing, and related pollution. A Huri is a girl of tender age, having large breasts which are round, pointed, and not inclined to dangle. The virgins of paradise dwell in palaces of splendid surroundings. Al-Tirmizi, Volume 2, pages 35 to 40. In his renowned book, Ihya Ulum ed-Din, The Revival of Religious Sciences of Islam, the greatest Muslim theologian, Al-Ghazali writes, according to Prophet Muhammad, the Houris of paradise will be pure women who are free of menstruation, urine, stool, cough, and children. The virgins will sing in paradise on divine purity and praise, we are most beautiful virgins, and we are for the honored husbands. The Prophet Muhammad said that an inmate of paradise would have the sexual strength of 70 men. He also said, an inmate of paradise will have 500 virgins, 4,000 unmarried earthly women, and 8,000 widowed women. Each of those women will keep embracing him for the duration of his whole worldly life. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, Volume 4, page 430.